Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Takeaway, and today we have a special guest all the way from the land of wine and mountains in Paul.
Right.
Brent Martini. Hello, welcome. So glad to have you. You're a lead pastor of Amplify Church.
Correct.
I remember when it was Paul Family Church,
That's right.
a couple of years ago. Would you just let our followers and people know, those who are watching, like just who you are, some of your favorite things, and the church that you lead in Cape Town?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a great privilege to hang out with you, Phil. I mean, we've known each other, or at least connected over the years, and it's great to be back here and to be with you on. Just to be here today. I think for myself, I've been in Paul. We've had the church for 22 years in Paul. We planted, started like most church plants in a house, and we had 8 or 9 people, and week 2 we grew from 8 or 9 to like 6, and then we exploded exponentially in week 3 and we were 4 people, and I thought to myself, what on earth are we doing in Paul? But God's been very gracious to us, so we quite enjoy it. And
that's awesome. Did you guys also meet in like a school or like a town hall or something as well?
Yeah, we did. We initially met in our house, then we moved to another smaller venue. I think it was called the Afrikaans Language Museum.
Yeah.
And then from there we moved to a school hall.
Yes.
And then I think in 2018 we bought a piece of property, an old warehouse, and renovated it and converted it into a worship space for us.
Yeah. Nice. And the name change to Amplify?
Yeah, that came a couple of years ago. We had a prophetic conference with a friend of ours that was down, and he prophesied over the church that we're going to have a significant name change. And at that time, I knew that because, without sounding like super spiritual, that's what God was speaking to us about, a significant name change. And so we threw a couple of names around, and it's actually a bit of a funny story. Sometimes when my wife comes up with ideas and names, the family laughs because some of the names are like a bit cheesy. And then one day she said, I just felt God give me the name Amplify. And when she said it, I took it to our leadership team, and they loved it, and we rolled with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love seeing what God's doing, and just amplifying His name,
absolutely,
and reverberating off those mountains.
Absolutely,
come on. Man, it's great to have you. I just want to kick off with a little bit of an icebreaker. We've got to talk a little bit, but the takeaway. If you could live off one takeaway for the rest of your life, people want to know, what is that go-to takeaway that you could indulge in breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Okay, it feels like a little bit of a confession session.
Yeah.
But I suppose it is. First of all, I think for the record, I don't eat a lot of takeaways.
Yeah.
But when I do, I've got to go Burger King.
Come on.
I've got to go Burger King. I know there's all other brands out there, but Burger King is my go-to.
There's just something about the burgers that just like, the fresh lettuce and tomatoes.
Absolutely.
And people want to compare it to everything else, but I agree.
Some of the other franchises, look at their patties or their meat. It's like the burgers are like super thin.
100%. And plastic.
BK, Burger King.
That's the way to go.
That's the way to go,
Come on. Yes, both of us. Burger
Absolutely.
King. That's the winner. But thank you so much for coming up and spending time with us and sharing with us. And you spoke around apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Would you just give us just like a condensed version of like what you spoke about, and then we'll kind of go into the conversation around that, that topic of apprenticeship.
I think firstly I want to mention that apprenticeship is something that I think I'm busy walking out even in my own life, although I've been serving God for so many years, I think God opens up certain areas of your spiritual life where you can grow and improve. And I think we do live in a Western culture. Yeah. I'm not saying all churches, but we do live in a Western church culture where everything goes, and, we have become, by and large, a people that are perhaps casual inquirers or casual followers of Jesus. Yeah. And that's not the goal. When Jesus called the disciples and they dropped everything, it was a call to apprenticeship, to come and walk with him and to learn from him.
No, that's awesome. And I think when you were kind of speaking, and we'll kind of like just kind of see the contradiction of these two, the juxtaposition of these two kind of topics. But when you were preaching, you were kind of, you're talking about apprenticeship and what that looks like, and the process of like, stepping into apprenticeship, and and just thinking about how our modern world operates, and in trying to have as many followers as possible and trying to be an influencer. And it's it's so very different, and maybe just talk about that process of what it meant for somebody to be an apprentice, but also maybe somebody that was also a rabbi, or somebody that was, having somebody follow them. What was that process in like the biblical context?
Yeah, I think maybe just to set some context, and again, to your point, I think today's with Instagram and all the social media, when you have followers, it's really not about the followers, it's about the person that they're following, and they are after more followers because ultimately it makes them look good.
Yeah.
I think biblical times to follow Jesus and to be an apprentice under a rabbi was all about, and it was really centered around these three things, and this is not from myself, it's from a book that I read by John Mark Comer, a really good book called Practicing His Ways, but it speaks about this thing of being with Jesus, so you can become like Jesus in order to do what Jesus did, and I think that's important. It's basically putting yourself aside, following Jesus, being with Him, and then as you grow in your relationship, and then do what Jesus would do, And I say that because, and I said it this morning, but what matters to God should really matter to us.
Yeah, and if we're becoming more like Jesus, and again, if His heart breaks for the orphan, breaks for this, and it moves His heart, and I think you mentioned it, irrespective of what your personality type is, if you're not naturally a compassionate person, by being an apprentice, and trying to be more like Jesus, the idea is that you learn and you spend more time becoming more compassionate. Absolutely. Because it's who He is, it's what He does, and so as modern day Christians, calling us back to kind of like really knuckling down and putting in the work, and not just this casual, I'm a follower of Jesus, I go to church, but actually realizing that our goal is and you said it at the end of one of your quotes, was to imitate. Right. And not to just repeat what was said, but it needs to become the very thing that you are. So, that process of us becoming, disciples of Jesus and, being His apprentice, is that we reflect Him, but it's as if He was walking and talking and doing the hands, the feet. That's the goal. The goal isn't just to project His sayings and His preachings and the good news, but it's actually to live it out. And I think you mentioned something around, it's not about the certificate. Our lives become, that.
Authentication.
That authentication of
absolutely. And I think in our context today, in our world today, a lot of, and this is not to slam Western Christianity at all. Really, that's not the goal. But I think much of Christianity has come down to, God, how can you serve me? And it's about me. And so we've placed a lot of emphasis on spending time with Jesus for me, and spending time with God so I can get to know Him better. And that's true, and there's validity in that. But it's more than that. It's about being with Him so I can literally begin to think like Him and have His heartbeat for my community and my and my friends and my family, and then to go out and, like we've discussed, practically go out and live out, because we are really and I touched on it, we are really the hands and feet of God in our society. We are His church on the earth. That's important.
And we spend our lives, we're going to spend our lives doing that, and like what you alluded to at the beginning, that you're still on this journey. Absolutely. And it's not something that, again, in the ancient days, obviously they got to a certain stage, and then it was time for them to kind of like transition into becoming a rabbi. But for us, I think, as if we're going to be disciples, I think that time comes when Jesus comes back. But
absolutely.
But while we're here and while we live, I think our goal is to become more, and so we're going to spend our lives becoming more like Jesus.
Absolutely.
There's no, hey, I'm 45 and I've arrived, or hey,
Absolutely.
I've been a Christian for this long and I've arrived. I know all, and now it's my turn to to teach others. But it's that we're going to be spending our lives doing this.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm 51. You just used 45. I'm 51. I'm still learning.
And
I think we have to posture ourselves in that place of, we're always willing to learn.
Yes.
We're always willing to engage. and I want to learn and I want to engage and I
Yeah.
want to be with him because I actually want to do what he told me to do, you know,
Yeah.
whether that be helping out within my local church context or reaching out to my neighbor, you know, being at a restaurant and showing interest in the waiter or waitress and blessing them or encouraging them, leaving them a bigger tip than what they would expect. It's all about reflecting and representing him. And one thing I did say that I perhaps just want to lean into a little bit is that very often we want the title, or we like the title of ambassadorship without the discipline of apprenticeship.
I love that, because you want to tell us that story that you told us about, what is his name?
Jiro Ono.
Yeah, Jiro
the
Ono. Because I
sushi.
think that speaks so much into this topic that you were talking about, in terms of like, we want the titleship, but we're not willing to sacrifice the apprenticeship.
A couple of years ago on, I think it was Netflix, they did a story on Jiro's life. Now he's 99. And at that stage he was still running the restaurant, but now he doesn't. And this Michelin star sushi restaurant, which finds itself in the subway of Tokyo, a place that you wouldn't normally find a restaurant. That legacy and his work continues through the apprentices that he's raised. And I did some study into that whole apprenticeship role that they do and the process they go through, and it's quite lengthy. And it's also that when Jiro isn't there in person, that legacy and work continues. And I mean, isn't that what Jesus has done? Yes, he's raised from the dead, but he's seated at the right hand of God. He's not on earth physically like he was in ancient times.
That's true.
But he's here in a sense through us, and we are his apprentices, and so we are to complete and continue his work and his legacy. And that's why people are still attracted to that restaurant, you know, because of the legacy that has been worked through by those apprentices. People should still be attracted to the King and the kingdom and local church because of us. Not in our own strength, obviously, but just by the way we live and by being apprentices, not just casual inquirers of Jesus.
I mean, that's so good. And it's like, and I think in the world we live today, I think as soon as we're offended or it doesn't work out for us, we're like, okay, cool, I'm out. Like, you know, it was fun, it was good, but again, you mentioned it, it's not about us.
Not about us,
you know,
absolutely.
and it's you know, we die to ourselves, and now we take on, you know, his values, his mission, you know, and what he's called us, you know, what he's all about, and that's what it means for us on a daily basis, to die to ourselves as we're becoming more like Christ, which is great.
And I think the other thing is that, you know, we live in a world with options. I don't like my cell phone network, switch. Don't like the car, buy a new car. And there's nothing wrong with changing, but we live in a world with options. There are no other options for us as Christians. That's why Jesus says, I am the way, singular. He doesn't say there's many ways. I am the way. So there is only one way, and that is to become an apprentice of Jesus so that his name is glorified. And that we represent and reflect all that he is to our community. And like that restaurant in Japan, people are still attracted to the King and the goodness of the King and the kingdom. It's so important.
And we are representing, and I mean, I think the late Miles Monroe said about being an ambassador is that you're in another country and you represent the country that you're there for, not your own opinions. So you may have completely different opinions. You may have a completely different opinion to how people should live or how the situation should play out. But as an ambassador, you don't represent yourself. You represent the one that sent you. And I think it's so important that when we are doing that we represent Christ and his authority and what he wants. But on the personal level, we are taking that on and we're becoming. So when we do stand in front of kings and presidents and people,
absolutely,
our personal lives, our, you know, who we are and who we're becoming line up with who Christ is.
So
and
important.
So when we are speaking, there's that authenticity of like, you yourself are not second guessing and going, well, I have a different opinion, even though I'm trying to follow Jesus, even though, I get you say who you say you are. I get that but I have, and it's so important that there's that, that authenticity.
And just to your point on ambassadorship, I've had a friend many years ago whose father was actually an ambassador in Europe, and back then, I don't know if it works the same now, but our South African government, after 4 years, I think it was 4 years or 8 years, I'm not too sure, but after a period, they would recall those ambassadors back to South Africa, because what they were finding is that if you stay too long in a foreign country, that that culture begins to rub off on you.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that happens with us.
Yeah.
We're out in the world, and the world culture begins to rub off on us.
Yeah.
And then people look and wonder, you're not that different to the world.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important. Not that we are called back into anything, but I think that positioning of ourselves to continually position ourselves with Jesus, so that the culture of the world doesn't rub off on us, but that the culture of the kingdom is influencing where God has put us, whether that be at work, in the marketplace, at universities, at schools, that culture of the kingdom is in a sense then rubbing off on the world, and having an influence there.
Yeah, and that comes from the daily walking with Christ, being in community, being at church, small groups, all of those things. And I think, as we go into the world, I think we should be heavily influenced by who Christ is, and it should be that thing that's like infusing us, and then again we get called back to it. And so I think it's this both and kind of
100%,
this correlation of like working together. But just one more question in terms of just if there's just one takeaway for guys to kind of get out of this topic and this conversation around apprenticeship, what was the one thing you would love to just leave with the listeners? And
the one thing I'll leave is something that, again, John Mark Comer said, and it's something that has become a bit of a mantra or a saying that I'm trying to work through in my own life, and that is this whole thing of to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, in order to do what Jesus did. It's as simple as that. I don't want to claim the rights on that because it wasn't me that said it. But to be with Jesus, so that you can become like Jesus, you can do what Jesus did. That would for me be the key.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, for sharing with us. And again, just encourage. And for those of you watching, we trust that you've been encouraged by this conversation. And again, just a reminder, you can always watch this sermon in its entirety on our YouTube page. So you can go there and watch it. But we trust that you have a blessed week. And if we don't see you next week, Wednesday, we'll catch you on Sunday. Have a blessed week. Cheers.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.